Alrighty. Been a minute. Not really, but weekly walk, weekly pod, weekly updates. I will go ahead and get this out the way now. There's a strong chance I may not be doing a podcast this Saturday. And the reason why is because I ain't really been keeping up with nothing. And I don't want to sit and do what I did last Saturday by just throwing y'all a show just to throw a show in. As a creative, I think that's the biggest thing now. Like, once you really learn and once you really realize that you're a creative, you operate totally different with how you share things. But you don't want to just put stuff online just to put stuff online. We all can do that. We've all been down that road. It's not like a thing. Or it's not an enjoyable thing, I will say that. So we're gonna start this off a little different today. One, I'm walking very late. Late as far as what time I would normally do this walk, because I would have started an hour ago. But I didn't feel like getting up. And it happens, but gotta get it done. So that's number one. Number two, I had an unpack yesterday, and boy, was it an unpack. Um, it was, the initial intent was to get my friend her space to unpack and share. But of course, as expected, which was necessary, it caused me to open up and share. And I had quite a bit going on that I didn't realize was going on. The biggest piece of it is, and I had this conversation on an episode. I don't remember the exact episode number, but it did come up. Being nice to yourself, being kind to yourself, or just being nice in general. Um, Being good to people pays off, right? And we know that, but we don't realize the magnitude of being good to people and how it can be reciprocated. Why am I going with this? There's and I started to put this post up yesterday on Instagram, but I think it was between it being too late and between me just not wanting to share it at the time that I was sharing it, I just didn't do it. But I worked for a previous company, won't say the name, and while with that company, I first started, this was probably one of my first jobs I've ever had in a call center. If you know, you know. Most people who know me know this story, but to a lot of you who are newborns, you're probably gonna be like, I don't know who this is. I don't know what this is talking about, but just walk with me here as I'm walking. Um, but I noticed, people come on the phone, they come in choppy, they come in hot. And me being me, at that time, I was very direct, cut and dry, to the point. I ain't had time for all the hubbub and hoopla and the rah-rah and all that. I'm like, look, what you got going on? How can I help? What we getting fixed? That's it. Didn't understand the magnitude of how or even why that would be a big deal. But as I started to get in more positions where I was taking calls, it made sense. Even in my role I do now, I'm not on the phone as much, but I interact with people a lot more, either physically or through my work. So bring it back to the original piece. First role, working in my zone, doing my thing, and the manager has a meeting with me. Every company gives them different names. Some people call them 101, some people call them 1010s. This particular place, they call them 1010, so that might give away the place, but not concerned. So we were consistently doing 1010s, had a great relationship with his manager. Ironically, we were both Panthers fans. And oddly enough, I'm wearing my Carolina hat as I'm doing my walk this morning. So she brought me in. She made these little clouds. They were like post-it notes that were shaped like clouds. And they had the words "Be Fluffy" on them. The reason it said that was because anytime I talked to people, it was very direct, very stern. And in many cases, it wasn't necessary. And it wasn't on some I'm rushing you to get you off the line. It was more so almost as though I felt as though they were bothering me. But in reality, they needed something, and I was the person they were calling to get whatever it was taken care of. So these clouds went with me to various departments, and every time I would sit at my desk, everyone would always joke about the clouds. They didn't understand. It's like, why do you have those on your desk? And I'd give them the whole story about my 1010, all that stuff. Well, fast forward, before the job that I have now, I was in service desk, and I've told people this already, so this isn't anything new. But in service desk, I was, and better yet, I'll layer it back. I'll take it back a step further. Before I got that position, I was in another call center role, but it was a more what I would call somewhat self-sufficient role. Um, all in all, management really didn't bother me too much because I did my thing. I come in, get my grind, and go home. And if there were like any technical errors, of course they were brought to my attention. But I was never too overbearing with the people who I conversed with. So I get the previous role, like I said earlier, about service desk, and that was kind of the selling point was that I had the customer service skill, was that I had the people person skill. I was patient, and first, first few days, I'm like, okay, we just doing emails, all well and good. They added that phone in. I don't know if a trauma light went off or if I was just having a moment. And if you don't understand the trauma light, ask somebody that works in the ER. They'll tell you about the trauma light. So fast forward, we're doing phone calls. I don't know if it was my first day, but it was one of my earlier points of getting into the phone group. And I remember it because we had just we had gotten the desk phones, but then they rearranged us as far as where we were sitting. And I was like, oh, I got a decent spot. I'm near the window. And a lot of people was like, oh, I don't like being in the window because it's too cold. And I was like, look, I'm warm natured anyway. So this right up my alley. Anyway, sitting near the window, getting calls. I got this one guy, not gonna say his name, don't work like that. But I always remember him from the call flow. And he basically thought I was incompetent and didn't know what I was doing. But the bigger issue was he had a bigger issue with the fact that they updated the system without his permission. He was used to what he was used to, and they made changes. So majority of the call would be him. Just majority of the time, if he called, he would gear so much more towards that than towards trying to like fix whatever he needed fixed. Fast forward, so we're in this call, and it was to the point where my manager had to get in on the call, and it was the only time she ever did it. But it was a teachable moment, and it was a lesson of you sometimes just got to know what's what, and not let folks run the call, but also still do your job to your best of your ability. And that's basically what ended up happening. There are individuals I work with now who called me and were not the most pleasant, but once they got their issue fixed, I was like the knight in shining armor. So got a few minutes left. Wanted to fluff all of that story out. But the conversation my friend and I had was just about being soft and being nicer. And the first thing that came to my head was that call center conversation, or that position where I first got in the call center and literally having to learn how to be nicer, or in those famous words, be fluffy. And as I'm doing this walk, the being fluffy is not physical fluffy. It's about literally being more softer with people and not feeling like, and I always start with this with a lot of my friends, and this is almost something I need to start with myself. You do not have to be the loudest in the room to be seen. You do not have to be the most aggressive to be seen. What you do have to be, if you're up to it, keywords, is the most respectful. Being respectful to people goes a very long way. And in many cases, the people that you're around will value that respect and value that safe space more than you know. So that's the primary message today of this walk, is not to feel, and even my friend who I sat with, we had to kind of reciprocate the thoughts, because I even shared with her on the level of, there's nothing wrong with feeling a certain type of way about what happens, but going from 0 to 100, or in her case 0 to 1,000, it don't be worth it. And I think it's so crazy because in many instances, or in many cases, I am always now more the calm person. Now, open transparency, 10 years ago, me and patience and softness and not being in a rush, well, those are all attributes that I was lacking. I'm not gonna even bullshit you. But now, as I've gotten older, gotten wiser, gotten smarter, I know how to operate from the right headspace. Bluntly speaking, some shit that others be stressing about, I just don't have the bandwidth for it. And now, even more of an aha moment is, since I've done this agile course, which I gotta start studying, really start studying, I've learned what's worth tripping about, and what's worth like, look, I'm doing what I can, and I ain't about to sit here and take myself through a whole lot of changes if I don't see the need to. So, all that being said, I'm almost about to pass out, but I'm almost at my destination. Be more relaxing and not feel obligated to like go off or be in this aggressive space, because everyone doesn't need the aggressive side. And that's even me saying this to myself. This is really me saying this to myself, because the truth of the matter is, no one no one's really gonna value that type of energy. They're gonna be more distant and most involved, most more disinterested in talking to you. They know you coming at them like it's life or death. Because it ain't. The things that you think are deep don't be that deep. Like even me being as big of a tech guy that I am, I don't expect people to understand the ins and outs and the depths of tech because that ain't their life. Now my life, on the other hand, it's a live and die, it's a live and die occasion when it comes to tech. But everyone's different, of course. So that's what I got for that. I will catch y'all next week. We may be wrapping these up a little sooner than later because we're getting close to that trip. Might do these while I'm out of town. We'll see. But we'll get there when we get there. Catch y'all on the next one.